Most romantic relationships don't go the distance. And those that do don't always seem all that happy. What if we're not all bad at relationships? What if we're just bad at managing stress? Till stress do us part.
Good morning. Good to see you guys. That is some low energy for a Super Bowl Sunday. I got to be honest with you. Some of you are like, I got sad when I figured out who was going to be in it. So I'm out already. But there's still tacos and nachos and wings, all the things that the Super Bowl is really about. And so that's my wish for you today is that you snack aplenty. And today we're actually going to be continuing on this series that we started last week that's going all February long. Called Till Stress Do Us Part. We're talking about what is it that drives relationships apart. And a lot of times we can assume that maybe we just picked the wrong person, that maybe there's something about the two of us, that maybe it's mostly them, right? But we've been asking the question during this series, what if your partner isn't the problem? What if it's actually that you're just really bad at managing stress? And more and more we are seeing that couples' relationships are peeling apart, not because they're not good at romance, not because they're not in love, but because they don't know how to healthily manage the stress between the two of them. And so we've just been unpacking that through this series. And I want to encourage you to take some notes today, write some things down, whether you are married in here, whether things are going great, whether things are not, whether you are single, divorced, whatever your situation is. I know there's stuff in here today that is going to help you live a healthier life in every aspect of your relational story. And so the title of my message today, if you are taking notes, is Overfilled. Overfilled. My wife and I don't know who else is like this, but my wife and I, we have completely different tastes in food. How many of you could never agree on where to go to eat? You just like, you're not, okay, some of you are like, I don't want to bring this up right at the beginning. Yeah, that's true. And I love my wife, but we just don't have the same taste for a lot of things. And so when we're not together and I have the opportunity to pick a place to eat with just a buddy of mine, I'm going to go to where I can eat something I can't eat with her. And one of the things that's at the top of that list is sushi. She's not a sushi fan, and I love sushi. And so a little while back, it was a couple weeks ago, I got to go grab sushi with one of my buddies, and so very excited about it. Of course, you got to go with all you can eat, which I take as a challenge. And I'm like, let's see how we can push this max here. And so we're eating sushi and hanging out and talking. And at some point in the conversation, I just asked the question as we're catching up on each other's lives of like, how's everything going in your life? Like, how's everything in your relationship? How's everything with your wife? And he was just like, fine. And you ever, like, when somebody tells you that things are okay, but you're like, the way you said it made it sound like you're lying to me right now. And I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, no, we're fighting all the time. It's not been great. And I asked him the first question I usually ask people when their relationship, there's a lot of tension in it, is I was just like, well, what does your schedule look like? And he looked at me like, what does that have to do with anything, right? And I'm like, what? And he's like, well, we have that. Well, okay. So Mondays, it's like we got to go. I got to get up early, and then I got to take them there, and then we got to go over here, and then we got to do this, and then she's over there, and then we actually don't see each other that night because we're crossing paths, and then we do this thing, and I got to get over here, and then on Tuesday is like this. He gets to Wednesday, and I'm like, I'm exhausted just listening to you describe what's going on, and I'm like, well, when do you spend time with each other, just the two of you? And he's like, at night, usually. It's at night. We get tucked into bed, and we both lovingly stare at our phones together, lying in bed, shoulder to shoulder, sort of scrolling and emailing and whatever else that looks like. It's a busy season, right? It's just a lot. It's hard for us to find time together. And I think that this is not just his story. I think this is a lot of people's stories. I wonder, if when you look at this picture, or you just think about the season that you're in, if there's something that sounds familiar about this, that you just feel like you are on the go all of the time and you're just missing each other. And I think this is the issue for a lot of couples. In fact, I actually think that the main issue for most modern couples that are having conflict is just that they are doing too much. And initially, when people hear this, like you're probably feeling right now, is like, no, it can't be that. It's not that. Because, we like being busy, right? We like having a lot of things to do. We got goals. We want to support each other. We have things that we're trying to like run after and make happen. And also we want to support our kids, and they're doing like 5 or 6 things each. And so we got to do all that. And we got to drive them and be at all the things that they need us to be at and make sure that happens. You got to go to the gym. You got to take care of your body and make sure that happens. And then the stuff at the house. And we're trying to get this project going on. And, then she's got a side hustle. And then I got to golf. You know what I mean? Like I have to make that happen. It's just a lot. It's good, but it's a lot. And I think a lot of people find themselves in this place. But I got to tell you, there is a difference between living a full life and living an overfilled life. Because the reality of it is not sustainable to continue to add and add and add to your plate, but never, ever subtract. And a lot of us find ourselves in this place, and it wreaks havoc on our relationships. We find ourselves like overpacking every little aspect of our schedule and then wondering like, why is it that we never have time to connect? Why is it that one or both of us is always on edge? And I think this happens to us slowly over time as we just continue to pile things on the calendar. And it's hard to take things off because we just really don't want to give anything up. If you're like me, you're like, I'm fine if you want to give some things up, but I don't really want to give any of my things up. And most of the things that we have going on aren't really bad things. Most of them are really good things, but just because something is good doesn't mean it fits. And that sometimes is the tension we find ourselves in. It's almost like having a full glass of water and continuing to just pour water into it because the water is clean, it's pure, it's good. But just because it's awesome doesn't mean that it all is going to fit in the glass. And when you over pour something, whether it's a cup on a table or just the calendar of your life, it makes a mess. And some of us are sitting in the middle of that mess right now. And if you're like most couples, usually this is where you get this bright idea of like, you know what? Things are really stressful right now, and there's a lot going on, and it's just so much. We're at each other. You know what we should do? We should add something. We should add something. You know what? We need something new, something different, something exciting. We should throw something else in there because that'll really rev things up. And then we're surprised when it doesn't seem to work. And I think part of the reason why we find ourselves doing this is because everywhere we look, our culture is trying to convince us that we can and really should have, be, and do it all at once, right? In fact, anything else is unacceptable. And all we really have to do is hustle. Isn't that like the theme of almost every social media post? You should just hustle a little bit harder. And most of us do, right? We are married to our jobs. We find ourselves glued to our phones. We are on call 24/7, or at least it feels like that. And we say to ourselves like, this is just how it is, right? Being overextended is the only way to get ahead and to get the life you want, and yet it's not really working. And so we overpack our schedules and we wear our busyness as this badge of honor, while our relationships pay the price for us doing so. And when we feel it catching up to us, we feel the strain of our schedule on our relationship, we're like, you know what? It's just a season, right? We just need to, it's a little bit longer, a little bit more, right? When I get to the place where I'm able to make this much, when I get to the place where I'm able to reach that level, when we're able to actually live in this particular neighborhood, like when we're able to get enough to where we can have this freedom in our life, then we can slow down and cut back and reconnect, and it'll be worth it. But few stories turn out that way. It's almost impossible to put an intimate relationship on hold while you pursue everything else in life and then just pick it back up as if it's always going to be there waiting for you. And I think it's not just rare in the lives that we live today, but it has always been a challenge, including the story that we're looking at during this series in the book of Esther. It begins right where you have this king and this queen, and they fall madly in love, and things are good at first. But like a short time later, the queen's cousin comes to her, and she says this to him. We read this last week, but just as a review, in Esther chapter 4, verse 11, she said, "All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king without being invited is doomed to die. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. In other words, like, they really haven't had time for each other in so long that she's starting to doubt their closeness overall. And I can't tell you how many couples I've spent time talking to that when I ask them what's going on inside of their relationship and things are tense or not good, that they say something like, "Man, I can't remember the last time we just went on a date. Just the two of us. I mean, we sit down and work on stuff. We definitely fight. I wouldn't call that a date." Right? But I can't remember the last time we did. I can't remember the last time we just like took a walk together and held hands and there was like no agenda. I can't remember the last time we had sex with one another. I can't remember the last time we had a conversation that was not about the kids or money. I can't remember the last time we got away for a weekend. I can't remember the last adventure that we just took just because. I can't remember the last time either one of us surprised the other with anything for any reason because we're just too busy. And what happens is over time, all this other stuff creeps into our life and becomes the priority ahead of each other, and the relationship gets squeezed out. And I think we see this inside of this ancient story as well. Xerxes is the king at this time, and he has so much that's going on. If you look at sort of the surrounding verses and what's happening in his story, he's dealing with his ex-wife and their really public breakup, which is a lot of drama. His generals are losing all of these battles and his army's dwindling and people are angry. He's starting to lose grip on his provinces. His advisors are trying to like give him counsel, but they don't agree, which is weird because normally politicians all agree on everything. But apparently in this ancient society, they didn't. And so they're telling him different things and he's not really sure what the right thing to do is. And he sort of deals with his stress by drinking a lot, which the book goes into a lot of detail on. And also, he just survived an assassination attempt in the story. And everyone's vying for his attention. I mean, it's a lot. It is a lot happening in his life. And his wife is equally as busy. If you look at the life of Esther here, she is snatched from obscurity and placed in the palace. And suddenly, all eyes are on her because now she's the queen, not just an ignorable peasant. And she has very little contact with her family, which, again, is being pulled away from something that's familiar into something that's different. She's trying to learn a completely different culture because she grows up as a Jew and is sort of thrown into this Babylonian culture that she really doesn't know a lot about. She's trying to keep part of her identity a secret from everyone around her so that they don't find out. She's required to keep this really strict beauty regimen and make all these public appearances. And not only that, but her cousin keeps coming around and trying to get her attention and tell her that there's this plot that is like to kill like everyone she loves. That's a lot as well. If you look at everything on these people's schedule and all of the stress that's stirring up in them, it's a lot. And stress doesn't tend to push us together. Oftentimes it tends to pull us apart. And I think that's what's happening here. Essentially, you have these two people who are overextended in their life. And because they're overextended, they're getting so stressed. And because they're really stressed out, they're overreacting to everything. And because they're really reactionary to things, they get disconnected from each other. And the longer they're disconnected, the more divided they are. It's almost like they're living completely separate lives. And I think this is a cycle that finds its way into our lives today. We find ourselves being overextended, doing so much, and that stresses us out. And now so much we find ourselves being reactionary towards little things. Sometimes we even look back and we're like, I kind of freaked out there. That was a little, of course we don't tell our partner that, but like we acknowledge it to ourselves privately. We feel the disconnection pushing us apart. We feel like there's this division between the two of us, and this cycle for them just eats away at their relationship, and everything but each other becomes their priority, and they grow apart. And the reality of it is, in each of our lives, as we see here, is that our need for connection is so great, it's so significant, that if we can't get it from our spouse, we will gravitate toward wherever it is we can get it. And I know when I say that, probably your brain jumps to like, I think he's talking about an affair. And maybe, but that is a sort of like an elevated, a really extreme, escalated example. But like think smaller, think broader, right? When we're not getting sort of the connection that we are needing from like another person, we find ourselves looking for wherever we can get it, oftentimes subconsciously. And this is the question I just want you to mull over today. Is there anything that you do that is separating you from or becoming a substitute for your spouse? Is there anything that you do that is separating you from or becoming a substitute for your spouse? And oftentimes it's not another person, at least not at first. Sometimes it ends up there. It could be for you like fixating on a news cycle. It could be scrolling through social media and like tracking people's stories that you don't even know. It could be grabbing drinks with friends. It could be like, group texting ridiculous memes to all of your coworkers. It could be like trying to like just achieve a little bit more and a little bit more at work. It could be feeling like you need to be needed by your kids and giving them all of the attention and very little to your spouse. Maybe it's for you, it's obsessing over your fitness, right? Or binging shows or constantly gaming online. There's so many different things that we could fill our lives with that are not that person. In fact, one psychologist actually calls these thirds. And essentially, like to give you a base definition, a third is anything other than the two people in a relationship, right? So everyone has thirds in their lives. Most of these things are not bad, but if you don't place limits on them, they're going to kill your connection because there's only so much that can fit into the cup of your life. To have a strong relationship, you have to maintain what therapist Stan Tatkin calls your couple bubble, which is just fun to say. Couple bubble. And essentially, a couple bubble is the boundaries and agreements that hold a couple together and insulate their relationship from outside forces. But when I read this, what I thought was so interesting is I feel like I've heard something like this before. You see, like Stan Tatkin, I'm sure he's amazing, but he did not invent this, okay? In fact, this sounds a lot like this ancient Jewish custom that has been around all the way back since the book of Exodus, except they didn't call it a couple bubble then. They call it a hopa, right? And a hopa is essentially this little small canopy that covers a couple during a Jewish wedding ceremony. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but essentially it looks like four. There's all different types of them, but it's like four sticks and like a giant beach towel, right? That is oftentimes sort of hanging over a couple, and only the couple is allowed to stand underneath it. The rabbi who's performing the ceremony stands just outside of it. Everyone else stands around it. And essentially, it's this symbol that God, who is above, is overseeing the formation of this new thing between these two people. It represents the boundaries and agreements that are being established with them and around them, separating the two of them from the rest of the world, that they're responsible now from this point on to limit what comes in and what stays out of the hopa. It's this reminder that their priority from this day forward is to keep a healthy relationship with each other under God. And in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul insists that even if we don't like fold this symbol into our wedding ceremony, some of you are like, it's too late for us. That's very beautiful. We're not going to be able to do it. That even if we don't incorporate it into our wedding, that we should pull it into the way that we manage our marriage. In fact, he says this in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, to honor Christ and put each other first. A wife should put her husband first, as she does the Lord, and a husband should love his wife as much as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it. He's saying, like, listen, the goal inside of this till death do us part relationship is to put each other first before all other thirds. In other words, like to lay down your life for someone, it means being willing to demote, to sacrifice, or to give up any of the thirds that interfere with your relationship with them. Essentially, what Paul is saying here, what this symbol of the hopa means in the ceremony is like, just so that you are aware, from this moment forward, your hobbies are not more important than this other person. Your job is not more important than this other person. Your kids or parents, specifically your mom, is not more important than this other person. Your friends are not going to be more important to you than this other person. Your own dreams are not more important than your relationship with this other person. Think of how anti-American this is. This is not the way that we think. And a lot of times these things that we invite in aren't bad, but the bubble between the two of you comes first. And if you are honest and you look at your own life, some of your bubbles are so crowded, there's really not even room for the two of you in it anymore. It's you two and all this other stuff around you that you've pulled in and filled your life with that are pushing the two of you apart. I wonder, like, when was the last time you took inventory of everything outside your relationship that takes time, energy, money, and priority away from your relationship? When was the last time you sat down and did this with one another? Because no matter when or where you live, whether it's ancient Babylon, like these two people in this story, or modern day America, there are roughly 5 things that you're going to have to make decisions about and work together on. And I just want to give you sort of a picture of this so that you have some sort of categories to brainstorm your own life. It's essentially you have to deal with home, with work, with kids, with surprises, and with magic. Some of you are like, what is happening right now? Let me just explain these one at a time, because some of them you're probably confused about. You're like, what's home? Maybe that's not the one. You have to figure out how to run your home, right? You have to figure out, like, who's going to do the laundry and the dishes, who's going to cook, who's going to get dishes, who's going to go do the grocery shopping? Like, does the lawn get mowed? Do we hire a person? Are you doing it? What is happening, right? You have to figure out sort of the basic chores and the maintenance of just running a home together. You also have work, right? You have to sort of figure out between the two of you, like, how much money do we need to make? Is that really what we need, or just what one of us wants? Like, what is the line? What's the number? What's our work schedule? Who's going to work, and when are they going to work, and what's that going to look like? Whose career takes priority? What are we willing to sacrifice between the two of us so that one of us can get ahead? Some big questions. Then there's kids, right? Who's going to pack their lunch and help them with their homework? If it's math, their mom. Okay, I don't know how to do all that. Right? Who's going to take them to practice and pick them up and schedule the orthodontist, and who is going to talk them through a breakup or friend drama? Somebody's got to do all this stuff. Then there's the surprises. Like, what do we do if the air conditioner breaks? Whose job is that? Like, who's the one that's supposed to take care? Like, what if dad has a stroke? What if someone hits our car? What if that someone is one of our own kids? What if grandma comes from a visit and neither one of us invited her? What if the dog gets pregnant for the 15th time? What do we do about this stuff? And then there's magic, right? which is sort of this other category of like, who's planning dates, right? Like, what are our holiday traditions going to be as a couple? When's vacation? Where are we going to go? Like, are there going to be moments where we just surprise the other person with something just because we're thinking about them? How do we make our anniversary special? This is the magic. And each of these things has to be thought through for a relationship to work out. But here's the reality. Maybe you have already figured this out. The first 4 over time can choke out the 5th. And this is oftentimes what happens to people. And when there's no magic in a relationship, the romance feels dry, and oftentimes it will die. And life starts to feel monotonous, and couples start to feel like roommates, and home starts to feel like boot camp, which is not fun. And we say things like, I feel like we're just going through the motions. I feel like we're just in survival mode. This is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I signed up for. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I feel like I don't know you anymore. It's our way of saying, where's the magic? Because the truth is, what happens naturally at the start of a relationship requires intentionality for the rest of a relationship. In other words, any relationship that works long term is because both people are putting in work. And I would say that a lot of that work is around protecting priorities, to try and keep each other the focus, to try and keep other things from crowding out the bubble. Because the reality of it is, no matter how hard you try, you cannot fix an overpacked schedule with optimistic thinking. Love sets limits on things that want to come in and crowd out the connection the two of you have. I think a lot of times we're like, I don't know, maybe we are doing too much, but you know what? We can do it. It's the two of us against the world. And we say all these really optimistic things, but we have no plan to actually sort through the reality of our lives and how we allocate our time. And these 5 things, actually having to subtract some things that are stealing our time, energy, priority, and resources from each other. We have to eventually make tough choices. We have to say no to things, even good things. Love is selective about what it does and doesn't do because it puts each other first. One New Testament author wrote this, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with the endurance the race God has set before us. And this principle here is powerful in lots of different ways, but in terms of what we're talking about today, essentially what he is saying to couples is, if you want to complete the race that you are running well with your spouse, you are going to have to lighten your load. You're going to have to do less. And not everything that you're going to need to deprioritize in order to elevate your relationship to where it belongs is going to be sinful. That's one of the things I think is so interesting about this verse. It's like, let us throw off whatever weight is slowing us down or getting in the way of the life that we are trying to build together, which is our connection with one another. And some of that stuff is sinful and some of it isn't, but if it's slowing us down and pulling us apart, it's in the way. Some things are really good, they just don't belong in the bubble. And so how do you know what to get rid of? The Apostle Paul wrote this in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23. He says, you say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. Not everything is beneficial. And when you read this, maybe you're like me and you're like, beneficial to what? And essentially beneficial to your relationship with God and beneficial to your relationship with your partner, right? Essentially what he is saying is this: it is deciding over and over again that if doing this thing that I'm doing this much or in this way in this season is hindering our relationship, it's no longer a good thing. And I think this is the thing that many of us are reluctant to say and mean, because facing this is not easy. And in fact, you know what you'll find when you sit down to comb through this? You will discover that your spouse will notice some things that is actually pulling your relationship apart that you were doing before you noticed those things yourself. Is there anything less fun than your spouse noticing something you shouldn't be doing before you notice you shouldn't be doing it? The answer is no. It is the most annoying thing in the world. Part of the reason we struggle with this is because none of us want to let go of things we're used to, even if it's in the way. But I got to tell you, just because a change is good doesn't mean it's going to feel good. In fact, most sacrifices that we make feel worse before they make things better. Has anybody ever noticed this about every healthy thing you've instituted in your life? Day 2 of a workout, you're like, this is the worst thing I have ever done in my life. And your trainer who has like abs on their abs is like, I'm telling you, this is the way it's going to get better. And you're just like, you're a liar from the pit of hell. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel miserable. I hurt. I didn't hurt when I was just laying around at home. Most solutions to real relational problems are not overnight fixes. They're these long, slow, focused processes that help us become the people that we want to be and prioritize the relationships that we want to have. And I got to tell you, like, you definitely need to set a boundary around something, one of the thirds in your life, if you are at a point in your marriage where you would rather let anyone else down than let your partner down. That is a sign that you need to clear out some of the clutter out from underneath the chuppah. There's stuff under there that doesn't belong there, that has prioritized itself above what is most important. And so here's your homework that I want to give you for the week, is to do this. To list out your thirds in your life, to rate the impact they're having on your relationship, and then to brainstorm some new boundaries. And here's the thing, this may be a tense conversation, so have it in a public place. Right, because the other person may be like, actually, I feel like that really does take you away from the two of us. And you come back because you like do that thing or you enjoy that thing, but like when you come back, you don't realize how horrible of a mood you're in. You don't realize what it does to you. You don't realize the stress it creates for the rest of us when you go and do, and then we are stuck. And you don't really understand how other people are reacting when you're like this and everybody else is trying to grab your, some of those things are going to be difficult to face between the two of you. And I got to tell you, this is something that you're going to have to do more than once. It's not one conversation and done. It's probably an ongoing thing, but you got to get the ball rolling at some point. I got to be honest. It's embarrassing how long it took my wife and I to sort of figure out that we have to have like a certain rhythm of managing like those 5 things in our life on an ongoing basis, or like there is havoc that is unleashed in our relationship. We've realized that like we have to, and you don't have to do this, I'm just telling you what we do, that we have to plan, like sit down and plan together our goals and dreams together once a year. Otherwise, I have all these goals that she doesn't know about, and then those are interfering with the goals that she has, and then we're fighting about it. And it's like, why don't you support me? And she's like, I don't even know what you're doing. Like, we want to sit down and make plans together and like dream together and set goals together so we're on the same page, and we've got to make time to do that every year. We also have to reassess that plan and our progress once a month to like sit down and be like, okay, is this working? Are we trying to do too much at once? Do you feel like I'm helping you with the thing that you wanted help with? Do you feel like I'm making any progress towards this thing that I said that I wanted to do? Is there anything we need to change? Is there anything we guessed at that's really not working out? And then we realize that we have to discuss our schedules and our budget once a week. And when we don't do this, when we finally do sit down to discuss these things, it is a bad fight. It's not great. We have to like be on the same page about like what's going on and who's going where on Tuesday, and then was there whatever, and you can remember this thing, and like who spent this deal, because I don't really go there. That is a lot of money on coffee. And then we have to debrief our highs, lows, and reminders most of the reminders are from me. I'll just be honest with you guys. Remember, you got to pick up Tegan tomorrow. I'm like, oh, yes. Let me put that like triple reminders in my phone because I will forget. But also just talking about like, what is going on with you? I think sometimes when we're so busy, we come home and the last person that we want to talk to is that other person because we've been talking or dealing with drama all day and we just want to zone out. And so we end up on our side of the bed staring at a phone, disconnected from the person that's supposed to be along on the ride with us. And this is how we manage things. It's a discipline, and it is not always fun to do, but it is healthy. And when we don't, our connection drifts, and our priorities end up shifting, and the bubble gets crowded. I think couples that do this well frequently find themselves asking this question, is whatever they're looking at, is this the best thing for our relationship right now? Whatever the thing is that we're looking at, this thing that you're doing, this thing that I'm focused on, this thing that I'm excited about, this thing that you have got, this thing that like you tend to like, and you have to, whatever. Is this thing the best thing for our relationship right now? Not is it fun, not do I like it, not will it benefit me. Does it benefit us? Is it going to make us stronger? Is it going to bond us together? Is it going to increase the magic between us or steal it from us? If we go back into the Esther story, they have this complicated relationship. They haven't connected in 30 days. They're busy. And she wants to go in and talk to him about something that is really stressful to bring up. And so she goes to him and she feels disconnected and nervous about how he's going to react or maybe overreact. And because of the way things have been between the two of them, she's suspecting that like everything else that is going on in his life is more important to him than her. And yet as soon as he walks in the room, as soon as she walks in the room, he says this to her. Esther chapter 5, verse 3. He says, what do you want, Queen Esther? What's your request? I'll give it to you, even if it's half the kingdom. Now that is a big thing to say. This is the biggest kingdom in the entire world at this point, and the kingdom's pretty important, and he takes it pretty seriously. But what he is trying to make clear to her in this moment is, babe, I want you to understand that as important as my kingdom is to me, compared to you, it's a third. If you think that there is something that is cluttering or creating chaos for the two of us underneath the chuppah, you say the word and it's gone. Because you matter more. You're the priority. You come first. And guys, I got to tell you, like, this is, I believe, what it is to lay down your life and love your wife as Christ loved the church. If you want to renew your relationship, if you want to rekindle the romance that you feel like is missing, if you want to restore the magic, be brave enough to ask your bride this question. What is your request? It's yours. You come first. Everything else is a third. You matter more. I'm not going to pull in and tuck in all this other stuff and continue to demote you over time until you feel worthless. When I made a commitment to you, it was the two of us under here. And I made a commitment to keep everything from pulling us apart or crowding us out. What's your request? It's yours. Imagine what your relationship would look like if you had this sort of attitude. A lot of times we approach each other, we want things to improve. We're like, I'm not giving up anything. I'm not compromising anything. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm not going to delay this dream for anyone. And what we're saying is like, I just so you know, there's a whole list of things that are way more important than you. That is a relationship killer. And it creates so much more stress for the two of us than we were meant to handle. This is what I want to pray over you today, that as you reflect on the thirds in your life and the impact that they're having, as you brainstorm boundaries of like what to demote, what to reprioritize, what to maybe cut out altogether, what to lean into, what to lean away from, that God would give you the courage to do the difficult, complicated, uncomfortable thing that's going to bring the most health to your relationship. It's not going to be easy, and it may not feel good, but it is the beginning of a new beginning. And some of us showed up at this series because that's exactly the thing that we're praying for. This is where it starts. Would you bow your heads across this room with me? I want to just pray this over you today. God, we are so grateful for your love, your mercy, your grace in our life. God, thank you not only for the love that you give us, but for placing someone in our life that we can love like you and that loves us like you do. And God, all of these relationships begin the same way, with chemistry and sparks and lots of magic, but so much life gets in the way and so much stress conspires to pull us apart. And God, I just pray that we would keep our priorities in order, that we would place our relationship with you first, and that we would use our relationship with you as the example for every other relationship we have. And God, this person that we have made a commitment to, that it would be our top priority here on this earth. God, that we would clear out the clutter of everything that is crowding our relationship, as difficult or uncomfortable as it is, and we would prioritize our partner. And God, as we do, may we have this sense that the magic is returning, that the priority is returning. God, may you give us what we are desperate for and what we can only find in doing things your way. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said, amen, amen.